Upon the Shore of the Tally Toor by John Tantallon. The antagonist of this story is a man by the name of Robert Moraine. In or around about 1977, Robert enjoyed a trip away from his native Dundee with his parents. The Moraine family visited relatives once a year in the seaside town of Kinghorn in Fife. Complemented by beautiful summer weather, the idyllic harbour setting of Kinghorn was an event Robert embraced. As a lone child, Robert would spend days exploring the rugged coastline of the ancient Kingdom of Fife. An area steeped in substantial Scottish history, Kinghorn was no exception. 16-year-old Robert walked with a smile along the cheerful front of the harbour, acknowledging local people as he passed. He was suitably impressed by the idyllic view of the Lothian coastline and the sight of the majestic Pentland Hills in the distance. As the harbour concluded and the sandy bank introduced, the young man clambered up a hill. At the summit of the brae, fixed upon a broad stone parapet, sat a substantial device. The long and slender white object instantly caught his attention. Robert ascended the remaining bank, stood confronted with an old yet visibly operational scenery viewer. He stood before the long discoloured metallic device. Although attached to a rotating fixture, the viewer sat positioned in the direction of Edinburgh. The intrigued Robert adjusted his frame and began to gaze into the device. Immediately, the coastline of Edinburgh came into view. Although distorted at first, the viewer soon came into focus. The sight of ships' masts and crashing waves indicated that the scope covered the dockyards of the port of Leith. Large cylindrical pipes decorated the landscape, the view of seagulls gliding over the horizon, and a slight har present. Robert fixed the gaze of the viewer on a structure. Situated on a stretch of beach, the spherical construction sat ominously on the bleak industrial landscape. Standing at the height of 2 men, the grey in colour brick tower held a sinister quality. At that moment, the sight of 2 rugged-looking men came into view, exiting a door of the building. Both appeared to be loading a nearby boat which sat on the shore close by to them. Suddenly, and to the shock of the spectating man, one of them raised a large metal object into the air. Bringing the tool down with ferocity, he struck a blow on the other man's head. The man collapsed on the pebbled beach without a sound to be heard. All Robert could hear was the sound of seagulls 8 miles away from where he stood on the shores of Fife. The lifeless body lay on the shale directly adjacent to the tower. A steadily increasing flow of red trickled from the battered form. The perpetrator stepped across the body and appeared to check for vital signs. There appeared to be none. The shocked Robert continued to view the carnage on the sandy Edinburgh beach. Suddenly, to his terror, the rugged assailant holding the weapon stared directly across the Forth estuary and towards him. Directly towards him, to his very gaze. A terrifying and menacing gaze. Robert panicked and leapt backwards from the viewing platform, almost crashing down the embankment with fright. Once he regained composure and looked through the viewer towards the shore, the man had vanished. Robert Moraine returned to the Kinghorn holiday home, bewildered by the day's events. What happened this afternoon? Did he see things? Did he witness a brutal murder? Who would believe him? After supper, the puzzled man attempted to make conversation. His uninterested parents half-heartedly listened to their son's query of the Leith Tower and its origins. Unfortunately, they had no answer for his curiosity and returned to their evening. Robert attempted to find a logical way to describe the earlier events with the men on the shore. In the end, he decided against it. The incident intrigued him so much that he decided to venture to the town the following day. Robert visited a nearby library, and to his luck, his findings were successful. After a while, he discovered some vintage literature on the mysterious Leith location. Martello Tower, situated in Leith Docks, is one of 3 situated in Scotland. Built in 1809 by Irish builders, the Edinburgh landmark served as a coastal defence. The tower, converted to gun emplacements during World War II, were never used in conflict. Robert, determined to get to the bottom of this nautical puzzle, decided to return to the viewing platform that afternoon. The weather remained pleasant and calm, a light breeze blowing across the estuary. Robert resumed his position as before and looked onto the location of Leith Docks. Today was different. A plumage of dense black smoke abounded from the grey brick tower. The man observed flames burned from inside the structure. A small vessel propelled across the water and in the direction in which he stood. The visibility on the estuary was different. A thick haar covered the front of the vessel and little visible. As the boat drew nearer, the contents of the ship became clear. Sitting at the rear of the small craft sat a large wooden trunk, emblazoned with the symbol of a solitary harp. The viewer changed direction, allowing Robert to ascertain just who commanded the boat, when to his horror he became terrifyingly aware that the captain was the same murderous individual from yesterday. The man, of substantial stature, stared directly at the Kinghorn shore and towards the terrified spectator. A grotesque, flaming red face, akin to Old Nick himself, drew closer with each of the devouring waves. The boat, now aground and seated on the sand of the beach, sat vacated as the hideous figure approached. Bringing a sizable bladed object from the heavy overcoat, the terrified Robert could not tear himself away. The approaching menace, now a few feet from the viewer, raised the rusted weapon above his head. Blood still visible on the brutal-looking object. Robert waited for the blow to come for what seemed like an eternity. Suddenly, the terrified spectator lost balance and crashed onto the coarse coastal floor. When the young man opened his eyes, the sinister assailant was no longer present. In the summer months of 2017, a quantity surveyor named Robert Moraine visited a property in Edinburgh's Leith Dockyard with a view to land development. The area close to the New Haven village led onto the dockland and close to the rear of the plot. As he drew closer, Mr. Moraine spotted something adjacent to where he stood, an abandoned grey construction nestled close to the water. The shadow of Petticoat Bay sitting imposingly on the Fife shoreline brought it all back to the startled man. Robert remembered the story like yesterday. He turned and asked his colleague the purpose of the grey tower, to which the man replied, "The locals call it the Tally Toor. It's been there forever and dates back to when Leith wasn't even a part of Edinburgh. It's to stay untouched. It's a listed site." Robert Moraine ventured towards the ominous structure. A large wooden door adjacent to him swung open with an ominous creak. He stepped inside and found himself confronted by a circular corridor. He slowly began to tread the worn path of the structure, the side of the tower saturated from years of dampness. As he reached the rear of the tower, he noticed an old symbol on the wall. Carved crudely, yet with detail, sat an inscription of what appeared an Irish harp. He reached out and caressed the deep incisions in the dark concrete. Whatever used to implement this work was created with great ferocity. The sound of a door slowly creaking shut filled the room. It emanated from the opposite side of the tower and startled the now alert man. Concerned by the unexpected sound of the door, he called out, "Hello there! It's just me, Mr. Marine!" But there was no reply. The sound of slow-paced footsteps on the gravel of the tower floor sent a shiver down his spine. Robert waited for whoever it was who had joined him to appear from the corner of the curving wall, but nobody presented. From the darkness of the tower and through the sound of distant seagulls, a voice became apparent. A deep and menacing sound with a harsh Irish tone filled the void of the Tally Toor.
It's been a while, sir, so it has. At last we finally meet.
The sound of terrified screams from a whimper to a crescendo filled the deserted area of the barren Leith landscape. After a while, Robert Moraine, who would exit the Tally Toor unharmed, would never return to that location ever again. Robert Moraine never found out the relevance of the strange and ominous tower or the mysterious harp. After that day, the quantity surveyor refused point blank to have anything to do with the Leith Docks project. When asked why by his superiors, he couldn't give them a plausible reason. They accepted his refusal and appointed another member of staff. Nothing more was said. Whatever happened that bleak afternoon on the windswept shore of Leith Docks greatly affected Robert Moraine. He moved abroad the following year and would not give a significant reason why. Nobody may ever discover what exactly rests upon the shore of the Tally Toor.